everyone. Are you aware of the incredible military power that Nazi Germany displayed, especially in the early stages of World War II? Soldiers who could fight for more than 3 days without sleep, marching over 60 kilometers, they were nothing short of superhuman. At the time, Nazi leaders proudly claimed that the secret to the strength of the German army lay in the superior genes of the Aryan race. But in reality, what supported these soldiers was not genetics. It was a special drug called Pervitin. Pervitin was actually a type of stimulant, methamphetamine. Nazi Germany administered this drug in large quantities to its soldiers, a magic pill that erased feelings of fatigue and sleepiness. In the short term, it certainly delivered incredible results. However, at the same time, it caused severe side effects and addiction issues. Why did they resort to using stimulants, and what impact did this have on the Nazi German army? Today, we will uncover the little-known relationship between Nazi Germany and the stimulant Pervitin. The relationship between Nazi Germany and Pervitin. Before Hitler came to power in 1930, Germany was one of the world's leading countries in drug production. Between 1925 and 1930, Germany accounted for about 40% of the world's morphine production. These drugs were available without prescriptions and had permeated all levels of society. However, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis took a different stance on drugs, harshly criticizing their use. For example, they viewed alcohol and tobacco as toxins, symbols of individual weakness, and believed these substances were robbing the Aryan race of its vitality. Despite this, as previously mentioned, the Nazi army later began actively using the stimulant called Pervitin. Why did the Nazis, who were so strongly opposed to drug use, come to embrace Pervitin? In fact, an unexpected event played a role in the spread of this drug throughout German society. It is said that the event that triggered the widespread use of Pervitin in Germany was the 1936 Berlin Olympics. At that time, the concept of doping as we know it today didn't exist. As a result, athletes from various countries took all sorts of drugs to enhance their performance in the competitions. Back then, the dangers of stimulants were not pointed out, and they were widely prescribed as new legal drugs. Seeing these Olympic athletes, the German people began researching ways to compete. As a result, a Berlin-based pharmaceutical company, Temmler, succeeded in synthesizing methamphetamine, which had the same effects as benzodrine, a stimulant. In the winter of 1937, Temmler began selling this new drug under the name Pervitin. Thus, Pervitin was born in Nazi Germany. By 1938, advertisements for Pervitin could be seen all over Berlin. Posters promoting the drug appeared everywhere, from station columns to buses, and Pervitin became famous within a few months. The tablets were extremely popular and could be purchased at pharmacies without a prescription. There was even a product that contained stimulant-infused chocolate. At the time, while other substances were banned or regulated, stimulants were not recognized as dangerous and were considered merely energy boosters, making them an exception. Additionally, the Nazis believed that stimulants, which they thought could bring them closer to their ideal of the perfect Aryan race, aligned with their ideology of striving for superior physical and mental attributes. Thus, after its development, which was triggered by the events of the Olympics, Pervitin rapidly permeated German society. Its extraordinary effects aligned perfectly with Nazi ideology, and it was widely accepted as a miracle drug. The Nazi slogan, "Germany, awaken," was, in a way, realized through the use of stimulants. During the war, the German army actively utilized Pervitin. Its main purpose was to boost the energy of soldiers and alleviate sleep deprivation and hunger. These effects alone provided sufficient tactical reasons to distribute the drug to soldiers. However, what was even more important were the psychological effects. Pervitin was said to stimulate enthusiasm, confidence, and a sense of invincibility, making it incredibly valuable to the military. Otto F. Ranke, the director of the Military Physiology Research Institute at the Berlin Army Medical College, had great hopes for the military use of Pervitin. Ranke's goal was to create scientifically enhanced soldiers who could fight harder and longer than their enemies, giving Germany a military advantage. Ranke himself was an avid user of Pervitin, taking it daily. In his wartime medical diaries and letters, he wrote that after taking Pervitin, he could work for 36 to 50 hours without feeling any significant fatigue. While working for 36 to 50 hours without tiring sounds appealing, if not for the side effects. Pervitin was not a magic pill, it was a potent drug. Naturally, its use carried significant risks. In fact, from late 1939 to early 1940, warnings about the dangers of Pervitin were issued by Leonardo Conti, the chairman of the National Socialist German Physicians League. As a result, the drug became available only with a prescription. However, these warnings were largely ignored, and the use of Pervitin continued to increase. Between April and July of 1940 alone, over 35 million doses of Pervitin were distributed to German soldiers. In this way, the military use of Pervitin rapidly progressed, greatly enhancing the strength of the Nazi German army. But despite the awareness of its dangers, military leaders prioritized its short-term benefits, and its use continued. As Pervitin became more widely used for military purposes, it had a profound impact on the strategies and tactics of the Nazi German army. Pervitin, which elevated soldiers' abilities to near superhuman levels, played the role of a secret weapon. Pervitin became a part of the army's daily rations. Soldiers were allowed to take Pervitin up to twice a day, and its effects were astonishing. They became fearless, cheerful, able to stay awake for over 3 days, and could march 60 kilometers without stopping. Testimonies from military commanders at the time vividly describe the dramatic effects of Pervitin. During a battle, many soldiers collapsed into the snow. When they were given Pervitin, within 30 minutes, those who were on the verge of death began to say they felt better. At that time, Pervitin was sometimes distributed to soldiers in the form of chocolate bars, and it is said that tank unit members were explicitly ordered to use Pervitin. One of the most famous of these products was called Panzerschokolade, which means tank chocolate. Pervitin became widely used in various units of the Nazi German army and eventually brought dramatic changes to the battlefield. The large-scale use of Pervitin began during the invasion of Poland in September 1939. The German army rapidly overran Poland and by October had placed the entire country under their control, shocking the world. This extraordinary speed in combat led to the term Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, to describe the Nazi German way of warfare. Blitzkrieg was characterized by rapid advances made by tanks and mechanized infantry, moving as swiftly as lightning tears across the sky. At that time, there were no dedicated tank units. Instead, tanks were used to support the movement of infantry units. In this context, it was only natural that the tank-only units, once formed, would be overwhelmingly powerful. Through Blitzkrieg tactics, the Nazi German army achieved victory after victory at an unprecedented speed for that time. However, there was a significant concern with Blitz: the soldier fatigue. The soldiers operating the tanks required regular rest and sleep, which slowed down the army's advance. This is where Pervitin came into play. Soldiers who were given Pervitin could work for hours on end without losing focus. This allowed the Nazi army's Blitzkrieg to continue relentlessly. In fact, Blitzkrieg was so dependent on Pervitin that without it, the rapid advances would have been impossible. In May 1940, the German army launched attacks on the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. This campaign is known as the Western Blitzkrieg. One particularly shocking story is the operation where the Nazi army passed through the Ardennes Forest. The Ardennes Forest, located near the border of Belgium and Luxembourg, had a maximum elevation of about 700 meters, with narrow roads and marshy areas that would typically make it impossible to advance. As a result, the French army, expecting the Nazis to avoid the Ardennes, stationed their forces elsewhere. However, the Germans sent more than 70% of their tanks through the Ardennes and advanced through the difficult terrain in just 23 days. It goes without saying that France was completely caught off guard by this strategy. During this surprise attack, tank unit soldiers were specifically ordered to take Pervon. As a result, the Allied forces were overwhelmed by the German assault. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill wrote in his memoirs, "I was stunned by the situation," admitting it was one of the greatest shocks of his life. British media also reported that the German soldiers were taking large amounts of drugs, describing them as fearless and brutal. The relentless, sleepless advance and attacks that surpassed human limits completely overwhelmed the enemy and led to victories at an astonishing speed. However, the dream that Pervon promised didn't last long. The use of Pervon began to cause severe side effects, which had serious consequences on the battlefield. As the use of Pervon spread, testimonies from soldiers who directly experienced its effects and side effects have been documented. These testimonies vividly describe not only the remarkable performance enhancements but also the dangers and long-term effects caused by Pervon. According to soldiers who used Pervon at the time, they often could not sleep on the nights after a battle, falling into strange, conflicting sensations. They felt an overwhelming need for sleep after fighting for extended periods, while at the same time, they felt fully awake. These conflicting feelings created a strange state where both the drug's effects and side effects manifested simultaneously, revealing the severe toll Pervon took on their bodies and minds. In another account, a soldier in a ski unit managed to escape after a fierce gunfight, desperately fleeing for his life. After several hours, however, he reached the limits of his endurance. He was utterly exhausted and on the verge of passing out. At that moment, he remembered he had Pervon in his chest pocket. He decided to take a pill, but since he was on the move and wearing large gloves, he had trouble selecting just one pill. In desperation, he swallowed all 30 pills in his pocket at once. A few minutes later, a powerful surge of energy coursed through his body, making him feel as though he had been reborn. However, the effect was short-lived, and soon after, he experienced symptoms of a drug overdose and lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness, he found himself 100 kilometers away, with no memory of how he had gotten there. These accounts clearly illustrate that while Pervon gave soldiers superhuman abilities, it also brought with it extreme dangers. In the short term, it provided incredible endurance and focus, but in the long term, it caused severe health and mental issues. Next, let's explore how the widespread use of Pervon affected the entire Nazi German army and what the ultimate consequences were. One of the major problems with Pervon was its strong addictive nature. As soldiers were given Pervon daily, their performance inevitably became dependent on the drug. An example of this can be found in the testimony of Heinrich Boll, a writer who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1972. During the war, Boll served in the German Wehrmacht, and in a letter to his family in May 1940, he wrote, "Could you send me more Pervon in my supplies? It works miracles." There were likely many soldiers like him on the battlefield. The problems with Pervon, however, went beyond addiction. Reports on Pervon use detailed various side effects, with the most notable being fatigue, heart pain, and circulatory problems. The effects on the heart were especially severe. According to reports from the French invasion, there were numerous cases of soldiers experiencing heart pain after taking Pervon 4 times a day for several weeks, and even cases where soldiers suffered heart attacks within an hour of taking the drug and had to be hospitalized. These instances clearly demonstrated the strain Pervon placed on the heart. In addition to clinical trials conducted by the military, human experiments were carried out on Jewish people and prisoners of war in various concentration camps, further revealing the toxic effects of Pervon. In response to these developments, actions were taken within the Nazi regime. As previously mentioned, Dr. Leonardo Conti raised alarms about the dangers of Pervon. He pointed out that any benefits from its use were completely outweighed by the subsequent harmful effects. In November 1939, Pervitin was made available only by prescription, and on June 12, 1941, the narcotics law was revised to regulate methamphetamine as a controlled substance. However, these regulations did not have the desired impact. The reason for this was that the short-term benefits of Pervitin were prioritized, and its distribution continued to be justified. As a result, despite Conti's efforts, the abuse of Pervitin could not be stopped. In fact, the situation worsened year by year, and cases of soldiers dying due to stimulant abuse increased. Astonishingly, Nazi Germany's dependency on stimulants reached the highest levels of leadership. Even Adolf Hitler himself used stimulants. Hitler received daily injections of methamphetamine as part of his treatment for Parkinson's disease. The amounts were excessive, to the point where after the war, Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Morell, was questioned, and it was pointed out that the doses and the frequency of injections were far too high. This overuse of drugs led Hitler into a vicious cycle. When the effects wore off, his health would deteriorate, causing him to demand even more injections. As a result, Hitler's mental and physical health deteriorated significantly. He became increasingly paranoid, had difficulty walking, and most importantly, gradually lost his ability to make sound military decisions. It has been suggested that Hitler's severe health problems and repeated errors in judgment during the final stages of the war were due to his methamphetamine addiction. Then, in 1945, when Allied bombing destroyed Pervitin factories and the supply was cut off, Hitler, suffering from withdrawal symptoms, took his own life in his underground bunker on April 30th. With this, the Nazi regime collapsed, and the war came to an end. However, even after the war, Pervitin continued to circulate widely within Germany. It could be relatively easily obtained, not only on the black market but also as a prescription drug. Doctors prescribed it as an appetite suppressant and as a mood enhancer for patients with depression. It was also used by students, especially medical students, as a way to stay up all night studying. Moreover, both East and West German armies continued to be supplied with this stimulant. Astonishingly, this continued until the 1960s. As its dangers became more widely recognized, Pervitin was finally removed from medical supplies in both East and West Germany during the 1970s and 1980s, and after the reunification of Germany, it was made illegal nationwide. Thus, Pervitin, which had been used for military purposes during the Nazi era, continued to influence society for a long time after the war. And even today, this issue persists in a different form. Methamphetamine is now known by names like crystal meth and is traded in large quantities, primarily in Europe and the United States. The problem of drug addiction is an ongoing challenge that transcends time and borders, one that humanity continues to face. The history of the world is still shrouded in mysteries. Let's continue our journey together to uncover those mysteries. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next journey.